Welcome to Sustainability Matters. I'm your host, Tria Case. Today's topic is green buildings. The more than 1 million buildings in today's New York City were constructed through a history of evolving technologies, and most of these buildings will likely still be operating in 2050. These residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional spaces span the 5 boroughs and account for nearly 2/3 of New York City's greenhouse gas emissions. Addressing the challenges of making our buildings greener is a tall order in a city of skyscrapers. Today, on Sustainability Matters, we highlight the required changes, evolving technologies, emerging careers, and tips that can help you change the buildings where we live, work, and play. Here is Andrew Falzone with an overview.
In the past decade, New York City has become a global leader in building sustainably, but in order to get to that point, the city had to make drastic changes to the way it would build and prepare for the future. That happened in 2019 when the de Blasio administration and the New York City Council passed a comprehensive set of laws heralded as the New York City Green New Deal.
So we are not just passing laws and rules and telling people they have to do things differently. This is a massive undertaking. The New York City Green New Deal is a $14 billion effort to change things while we still can.
And included in that New Deal were major changes in how new buildings in New York City were designed, but not everyone was on board.
We've already seen the opposition from the big oil companies, and we certainly felt the opposition of the real estate lobby in these last months. One of the highlights is, for the first time on the earth, the first major city on the earth to mandate that our buildings must stop emitting so many dangerous pollutants, that our buildings must be part of the solution and not part of the problem. For the first time on earth, a major city says no more. It's now law that our buildings must do the right thing for the people of this city.
That law is known as Local Law 97 and made substantial changes to the way buildings were designed. Just 22 pages in total, the law sets goals and deadlines to make the city carbon neutral by 2050, and its enforcement has continued under the administration of Mayor Eric Adams.
Under Local Law 97, most buildings over 25,000 gross square feet that exceed emission limits in 2024 will face fines. By making energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades, you can turn compliance into cost savings. What does Local Law 97 mean for your building? Find out today by going to accelerator.nyc to learn more.
To make their buildings more energy efficient, landlords can add solar panels, upgrade heating and cooling, or convert building systems from gas to electric and install energy efficient windows. And for buildings that are brand new, they can be completely redesigned. One example is the new headquarters for JP Morgan Chase, located at 270 Park Avenue. When the skyscraper is done, it'll be the 6th tallest building in New York City, but the tallest to be powered purely by electricity sourced from a hydroelectric dam in upstate New York. The construction experts at B1M explain 2 more sustainable features.
Special filtering systems increase natural airflow from outside, reducing the use of air conditioning. The architects also claim that the building reduces the use of electricity by circadian lighting design. That's the sun to you and me.
But nowadays in the big green apple, the demand from city government to build green is so strong, some fairly new buildings are already considered out of date. Opened only in 2020, One Vanderbilt was lauded for fighting climate change, but the building uses natural gas as part of its energy supply. And while natural gas is relatively clean, in 2021 the city passed a law banning all fossil fuel combustion for new construction, meaning the latest generation of green buildings, like 270 Park Avenue, will be all electric. If you own a building and are looking for ways to green it up, you can go online and search for accelerator.nyc. It's a free program that offers one-to-one counseling for building managers, owners, and developers to help New York City go a little greener and get a little cleaner. I'm Andrew Falzone for Sustainability Matters on CUNY TV.
Welcome back. We're here in studio with our guests. Joe Chavez is the Deputy Director for Resilient and Efficient Buildings at the New York's Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. Solemantou Doumbouya is an architecture student at the New York City College of Technology. She's the chair of the University Student Senate and president of the City Tech Student Government, and a student trustee of the City University of New York. So thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Treya.
So New York City's set some pretty ambitious goals. Joe, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing, what's been successful, and why is it so important to us here in New York City?
Certainly, Treya. And I think all New Yorkers are aware, after Sandy, after Ida, and, most recently the, smoke from the wildfires in Canada, that climate change is impacting New York City and our way of life, and we have to do something about that. And so from a policy perspective and from the mayor's office, we have to look at what is our impact in New York City. Where do most of our emissions come from? And in New York City, that's buildings. Buildings make up 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions from New York City, more than any other sector, more than waste, more than transportation. It's the energy that's consumed in buildings that is, our biggest impact on the climate and the planet. So in 2019, under the de Blasio administration, City Council overwhelmingly passed Local Law 97, which was part of the Climate Mobilization Act. And Local Law 97 requires that all large buildings, 25,000 square feet and above, start to reduce their emissions in 2024 to meet specific emissions targets that will progressively get more stringent in subsequent compliance periods, 2030, 2035, 2040, with the goal of buildings being essentially carbon neutral by 2050. That set the bar. It was one of the most ambitious policies to take action on climate for any big city in the world.
Very ambitious and not easy. Solemantou, you're an architecture student. What are the kinds of things that you're learning about that are going to help us get to these goals? Is it changing the way we're learning about design?
It's changing the way we're learning about design, but some of the technologies and the consideration we make when we are designing. Today at my school, we focus a lot on energy conservation, on green buildings, but really what it means to build green. It's not only putting a garden and then, whoop, we're green. No, we are putting a lot of emphasis in the research that we do prior to starting to design. Our site analysis, taking into consideration the flood levels, taking into consideration the orientations with sun, with wind, because in my school what I'm learning is that it's all about going down to kind of the basics. We've developed so much and we're using so much, and now we're trying to go down to a point where we're using just what we need in order to stay comfortable in our living environment.
Are there particular steps that you're seeing buildings undertaking at this point that are helping them move towards Local Law 97 goals?
Currently, buildings can meet compliance just by doing some basic energy efficiency. So that could be converting all of their light to LED lighting, installing smart controls on all of their heating and cooling systems, adding additional insulation so none of the heating and cooling is leaking out. Because the law was designed to be progressive with the emissions reductions, buildings don't have to convert to 100% electric heating tomorrow or January 1st when the first compliance period starts. So it does give buildings time to plan for deeper emissions reduction and for a full electrification.
Why don't we take a student question now and see what folks out on our campuses are thinking about. We're going to hear from Grace Rabu from City College.
Hi, one of the questions that I have is how can we inspire and mobilize residents within the same building to collectively prioritize sustainability, encouraging them to initiate collaborative effort and take action that enhance the overall sustainability of the building?
And that's a great question. Do you have some thoughts?
Sure. There's homeowner buildings, so like a condo and co-op type buildings in New York. There's also rental buildings, for tenants. And so I think the opportunities are, unique to those types of buildings. Obviously, as a homeowner, they have a little more options available to them to go ahead and upgrade their appliances, to make changes and certain alterations to their unit as they see fit. And for tenants, a little more limited, but they certainly have options within their control to upgrade lighting, again, to LEDs, if they have programmable thermostats, to make sure that those are set to shut off during certain times or to, reduce the set point that they're set at. But in both buildings, we do see certain building associations or a homeowners group or a tenant group. I know my building has like a WhatsApp chat where everybody's kind of texting and sharing ideas. And so I think in terms of looking for collective action, it would be those sorts of situations where people are sharing ideas. Con Edison also offers a smart usage rewards program where over the summer months when there's peak energy usage, if you are enrolled in these programs with their partners and you reduce energy during those times, you can get rewards.
Right, demand response.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's probably going to become more and more important as we move towards electrification.
Definitely.
So this is really going to create a demand for more people who understand about how to design buildings that are green, how to use buildings that are green. What made you, Solomon, to decide to become an architect? And what's behind your drive for becoming such a leader in your student environment as well?
My first thought about architecture was my father, because he's a civil engineer. And I wanted to do something close, but not exactly that, because I like to move around. So I started thinking about a field that was related to construction, of course, but also a field that would allow me as an individual to explore what I love to do, which is designing, which is communication, which is solving problems and resolving conflicts. And I feel like architecture, although it's a very technical field, it's also a very human and interactive field. And I like when these two come together. So that's what I wanted to do, and I've always loved serving people. So my drive for social justice has always been inside of me. So looking at my career choices, I needed a career that would allow me to do that. So I vowed to look for something, and choosing architecture and looking at how architecture impacts people, how I can merge architecture and advocacy all together.
Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Now let's turn to a field story about concrete research. The concrete industry, responsible for about 8% of global CO2 emissions, will also need to demonstrate lower environmental impacts by 2025. Dr. Mohammed Bahalsani from the Bernard and Ann Spitzer School of Architecture at City College has been collaborating with several universities on a project to build 3D printed structures that capture carbon. Mariev Ami met with him at the Advanced Building Construction Lab, the ABC Lab, where he has been able to involve students in his research.
The heart of the work that we do here is to alleviate the pressure on natural resources. So we look into efficiency of the design, and also we look into materiality, structural analysis, and fabrication. So these are four main sectors. We received a project from Department of Energy, which is carbon absorbing concrete. And we basically tied the idea of production of carbon absorbing concrete within the framework of efficient structure. So the goal of the project is to design a medium-sized building that has these efficient forms that are 3D printed using this recipe of concrete that is carbon absorbing. Traditional way of construction, especially when we get to material like concrete, we have all these straight members, walls, beams, columns, that it requires a lot of concrete in places that are unnecessary. So we work on TPMS concrete, triple periodic minimal surface concrete, to reduce the amount of concrete in the built environment.
We work with two already invented shapes and two other shapes. In terms of concrete use reduction, we have about 70% less used in this particular model because we comparing this model with the use of a 1 cubic feet concrete block, and all the save space, as you can see, resembles our savings in clinker production and concrete use and transportation, of course. It's going to be adding up on the top of our CO2 savings.
These are really complicated shapes, and using traditional method of construction, it's impossible to make them happen, right? So you need 3D printing, advanced fabrication method using robots to create these forms. That's why recently we are moving in that direction, because now we have the technology to build these efficient forms. In the past, it wasn't possible. You can see different shapes and geometries that we are working on. These are just smaller scale.
Concrete is very strong in compressive loads. However, in tensile loads, it's very weak. And so the way we test for tension is by applying a load perpendicular to the specimen. And that way we can understand the tensile load that cracks this. And with this information, we can understand the mechanical properties of the beam.
We are focusing mostly on structural analysis, testing, numerical analysis. So our colleagues at University of Pennsylvania, they are working on the new recipes of this bio-based concrete that could absorb CO2. So far, they have successfully built a smaller scale prototype that is 3D printable, and it actually absorbing CO2, but we have not yet tested at semi-scale or full scale. But that's the goal that we are moving for.
Welcome back. Let's take another student question.
Hello, my name is Eric. I go to CCNY and I'm pursuing a bachelor's degree in computer science. My question is, what are the letter grades I see posted on the entrances of buildings in New York City mean? And how do they relate to the greenness of the building?
Another great question. Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, we're starting to see these all over. They're a result of Local Law 33 that was passed in 2018. And that law requires all large buildings over 25,000 square feet, so similar to Local Law 97, that buildings post a energy efficiency grade at the entrance to their buildings. And so this letter grade is showing a efficiency score that is based on the US EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager program. And so all large buildings have to submit their energy usage data into this portal, the Portfolio Manager program, and it will calculate a grade, a score from 0 to 100 for your building. And so what Local Law 33 does is it applies a letter grade, from A to D, or F if you completely fail, to these buildings. And so this is a law, buildings have to post this. And it's helpful for a few reasons. One, if you are a tenant, either a commercial tenant looking for space, or you're a resident looking to, rent an apartment somewhere, you can look at that building and it may give you an indication of what you may end up paying in your utility bills. Because if the building is, not using energy well, if it's leaking, if there is not control over the heating or cooling systems, those are some of the things that cause buildings to use a lot more energy than a much more efficient building.
Are there particular technologies that you're seeing being utilized in these buildings that get an A, or are there some low-hanging fruit activities that you're seeing buildings take on?
Definitely. I think a lot of it can start with just some basic energy efficiency, and that would be low-hanging fruit items, upgrading your lights to LEDs, installing smart controls wherever possible. For buildings that are doing well, that are like a high-performance building, what we see is that they do, invest a lot in controls, smart controls for those buildings, a building management system or a building automation system that's really, a computer controlling all of the energy systems and lighting systems and electric systems in those buildings. And as we look now towards decarbonizing buildings and trying to reduce fossil fuel usage, what we're seeing are buildings starting to install heat pumps to heat, provide space heating, but also for hot water. And so these systems can also be controlled by these building automation systems to fine-tune, delivery of heating and cooling to the spaces, whether it's a commercial building or a residential building.
I want to come back to heat pumps because I think folks are hearing a lot about them but may not necessarily understand what they are. So I want to come back to that. Salmantou, are you learning about different tools that we can utilize to take a look at these technologies? And in thinking about that, do you have sort of suggestions about how we make sure they are affordable and are able to be adopted by sort of all the communities across New York City?
I think it's a complicated thing to do because we have inflation, a lot of other things going on. We want to save our planet, but then it's really expensive to save our planet. But I like to think that the price of not saving our planet is even more expensive, right? But I think that within the community, like you said, there are different things that we could do to help each other. I mean, we have districts, we have council members, we have the government that can offer some of this support. But inside the buildings, I think it could come down to awareness. Maybe residents, everybody can contribute towards that cause, right? We were talking about probably having group chats where people exchange ideas, but we could also have places where people meet, where people fundraise for these different things, because it's true that it is a lot of responsibility on the owner and others to make that happen. Now, that's also complicated because rent prices are high, but I think it could come down to a conversation between owners and residents, depending on the building type, on what works for them. What we are learning during our design process is, as new architects, as we're building new buildings, how are we making things that work within themselves? This semester, we are building an office building by Little Island, and we're thinking in my particular group about an environmental buffer, having a botanical garden museum inside the office building that will help with heating, that will help with cooling, that will help with having that place be an environmentally safe and sound place that actually helps the whole surroundings. So that's when we're thinking about our new buildings. When it comes to the old buildings, then it becomes more of a conversation depending on the building type.
Absolutely. We're going to now take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. So one of the things you were talking about earlier is electrifying and utilizing things like heat pumps. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more and what that's about and how that would work?
Sure. A heat pump works similarly to an air conditioning unit, but in reverse. Instead of it cooling your space, it's going to provide heating through a refrigerant cycle that I won't get into because it's a little technical and complicated. But these are a huge opportunity, and they're used, in a lot of other countries around the world currently to both heat and cool buildings. And so we're just really starting to utilize this technology here in New York City, and it has huge potential. And so we're already seeing a lot of buildings switch to heat pumps for all-electric space heating. We have, I think in Brooklyn, in 2021, they broke ground on the first all-electric skyscraper, which is exciting. I think there's one that's going up in Manhattan, starting construction soon. And we have a building in Brooklyn that is one of the largest residential all-electric buildings, and it's using ground source heat pumps, which take the latent heat in the ground and use that to preheat the building, and then they use the electricity to, bring it up to an even higher temperature to reduce the emissions. And so these buildings are running without fossil fuels at all, 100% electric. And then for 1 to 4 family homes, there's other options available to both heat and cool using heat pumps, and there's plenty of programs and rebates currently through both the federal government and the state, that can help support homeowners in purchasing heat pump equipment.
Amazing.
Yes.
When we think about that in the context of resiliency, how does that interplay? What are some of the cornerstones of technologies that you're seeing deployed that will help us be more resilient?
So there are a few technologies that we're looking at for building resiliency. One being solar PV. To have on-site generation of your electricity, especially if you can combine that with an energy storage system like a battery backup, that can help buildings provide power or maintain power in the event of any kind of power disruption to the grid. So a lot of buildings are looking at how they can couple both solar and energy storage systems to provide that reliability. Another thing that helps buildings be more resilient are green roofs. We're seeing a lot more rainfall in New York City, and a green roof can help retain some of that rainfall to prevent it from running into the streets, because all of these surfaces are pretty much impervious, and that water will just go wherever it wants to go. And a lot of times that's in our buildings, in our subways. And so if we can build infrastructure and buildings that act like sponges that at least can hold that water, then we're preventing a lot of this stormwater runoff that is resulting in a lot of the flooding that we're seeing.
I want to thank both of you for the time and for coming here and for sharing your expertise and for being dedicated to what you're both dedicated to. It is what we need in order to reach our goals, and that's all we have time for today, but I really hope that I can get you both back on and that we can talk more about this topic. Please keep the conversation going and follow us or send us a message on social media. Thank you for watching, and tune in next month when we will discuss waste.